All right. Going to call the meeting to order at, what is that, 7:05? Thank you. I'm gonna take, so right now you guys are muted. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand. As you saw, the meeting is being recorded. I'm going to go around the room and say who's here in person and then who's on Zoom. So we have Denise Demkoski, Kat Copeland, Andrew Brooks, Ben Mutes. I'm gonna get
Richard
it.
Fishman.
No, I'm gonna get it. Richard Fishman, Marcy Eckel, Frank Ramsbottom, Tina Andrew Croat, or okay, Aisha Anderson, John
Bates.
Thank you. John Bates, Melissa Rollins, Lisa Lavina. And via Zoom, we have Hannah Richardson. And is there anyone else on there?
There is Arnie, but he is not a member.
All right, so to begin, we'll have Design Lab start to review the staff feedback regarding the concept design.
Cool. How do we get our,
Oh, so let me see, because now we have everything running through here, so bear with me one second. Is there a certain slide you'd like to start on?
no, you can just start at the top. I mean, we've got a variety of content to review with you all. The staff feedback is part of it, as well as the concept, updated concept plans and the 3D model. So we can just start at the top and work through it. And as always, if there's any questions along the way, feel free to speak up, raise a hand, let us know, and we can pause. So yeah, just keep clicking forward, please, Denise.
Sorry, I had to unplug my mouse, so.
Yeah, that's where we are. Keep going. So yeah, the thought for our end was to go through a couple introductions. So we want to review the updated work plan with you all. There's a paper copy in front of you and we'll pull it up on screen here in a moment. And then we also wanted to share the 3D building scan of Randall with you. It's a very exciting first step that's been completed that we now have at our disposal. So we'll share with you what that's all about. And then we were going to talk about sort of the exterior, do the exterior portion of the building first, if that's okay, but it doesn't matter if we need to do the building committee portion, we can do that. But for the exterior committee, we want to basically treat it as a listening session with all of you, hear what your goals are for the composition and the character of this new addition within the town. We've got some, sort of precedents of our own work of similar, additions to historic buildings that we've done, that we just want to have a dialogue and hear what resonates with all of you and what might not, so that we can establish some guiding principles about what we want the exterior addition to feel like. So it's mostly us listening today. We'll have a bunch of stuff on screen to share with you that you all can react to. And then we're going to shift gears into the building committee portion of the meeting. We'll review the staff feedback, some updated plans that we have, and have a discussion around all of those as well. So you can click to the next slide. So that's going to be hard to see on screen, which is why we printed it for you all. It's been refined a little bit since we met 3 or 4 weeks ago. But we tried to kind of put everything here as best we could in sort of a one-stop shop, so you guys can kind of understand what we're trying to achieve in each workshop and each phase of the design process. So we gave you an overview of that all in our kickoff meeting a few weeks ago, but we are now officially at our first schematic design workshop. It's exciting. We'll review the staff feedback here in a moment and everything I just discussed, and then this kind of maps out the pacing of meetings for the duration of the process. Things do come up. I know schedules change, but we're trying to map this out so we can keep pace and meet the milestones that we've established. Andrew will talk in more detail about what we've been up to since we saw you a few weeks ago, and what we'll be doing, for the rest of the schematic design. Yeah.
So this graph shows what we've done and where we're at. The pinkish purple line is today, WS1 is today's workshop. What we've been up to the last few weeks since we saw you last. We have gotten the building completely 3D scanned, so we have I don't want to say a perfectly accurate model, but we have a very accurate 3D model built with a bunch of point cloud data that we can always refer back to. It's an extremely useful tool. I'll show you a few images from it coming up. We've also interviewed the staff again. It was the first time we'd spoken to them since the feasibility study. So it's been over a year. There was some feedback when we did the feasibility study before. It was kind of during this really unique time for a library during COVID, of course. And so there were things that have changed. They were somewhat minor, but there were comments back. And it was exactly what we were looking for. We really appreciated how the staff kind of considered the stages that we were at. And sometimes you get comments quickly about materials and, carpet types and stuff. So they completely understood the programming. It was extremely helpful for us. And then the following week, we got our bunch of consultants out on site, MEP, fire protection, structural, and geotech to assess the building a bit more, go back to their feasibility study, make sure everything's still accurate. And so they're working through that now. We are also, and then coming up in the next few weeks, we are looking to schedule some geotech borings. So we'll kind of drill some small holes around to figure out what the makeup of the landscape is. Make sure the structural intents will work. We'll also schedule, a few of these things are dependent on what I just heard from Denise, but we are probably going to schedule a meeting with the fire department. Probably not the school meeting now, but we'll see. And we're going to meet with the staff again to go over comments that we get from here. We're going to massage these plans that you're looking at some more as well. And then we'll meet with you guys again for the second workshop. And then we're hoping to schedule a few tours of other libraries with you all kind of around the area, possibly closer to the city. But we will work to schedule that with a few libraries that we want to see and maybe a few libraries that you guys want to see as well. And then that will complete schematic design for us. Next one. So these are some images from our 3D model. You can see it looks very similar to the library. It obviously doesn't have the color and the kind of scale of the brick on it, but we can apply that. And we plan to as well to make this even more accurate. But with this, we can accurately dimension, accurately size whatever we need to, including any mechanical plumbing equipment. It's become extremely helpful in our office. If you want to keep scrolling through, we've been scanning every building that we work on now. And we're extremely happy with it. In this case, we also got the landscape scan, which has already been a benefit to our landscape architect as well. So you can see here that the colors are different, but this is a pretty accurate representation of the interior of this library.
So it doesn't show you anything that's going on inside the walls. It's literally just.
No, it's yeah, mainly size, massing, profiles and stuff, but yeah, it doesn't see into the wall. Maybe one day.
I don't know why in my mind I was like, oh, that's so cool. They're just gonna scan and know where the pipes are.
That's what I
That,
thought.
like, for some reason, that was
Thermal
my,
cameras.
yeah, I was like, this is the 3D thing that we need. Okay.
That's what I thought too.
That is what you thought too? Okay.
That's why I was making the jokes about finding like the skeletons in the wall.
Yeah, yeah.
But you can see, and if you want to go back, sorry, this does help us even locate the you can see those white marks at the top of the last image are diffusers. And so it does help us still even locate those existing conditions.
I'm just curious how this works, and it removes all the interior, like the bookshelves and stuff? Or did you have to go back in and take all that out?
So the scan takes in all of the bookshelves, but the modeling is actually done by hand. So the walls are built basically over the point cloud model.
Got it.
So yeah, those are removed, but we could add them in as well.
Looks like moving day.
Yeah. Clean slate, huh?
You like it like that, right? I like the colors better.
Cool. Well, we can, yeah, so this is at our disposal. It's an incredibly good resource, and for the value, it's going to be immensely beneficial to our process, especially when we're dealing with an old historic building like this. So we're psyched to get it. We have it for our use, and it'll be a hugely helpful tool. Okay, so we can move forward and wanted to talk about the building or the exterior committee. So again, as I mentioned, this is largely a listening session for us. We do have some content to share with you in terms of renovations to other libraries and additions to historic buildings. But I guess it would be helpful if you all wouldn't mind who is on the exterior building committee to raise your hands and introduce yourself. Sorry, I don't know everybody's names yet, but we'll
Sorry,
get there.
Frank, you are too.
Frank, okay, cool. So this is great. We love that you guys are involved and are representing the community and being a part of the process, and we're eager to hear from all of you. So perhaps if you're willing, just spend a couple minutes sharing what your goals are. Either they're individually or through as a community voice, like what you're hoping to achieve out of this process from us. That'll just really help us understand and guide this process so it's successful for everybody. Who wants to start?
I'll start, I guess.
Okay.
Everyone wants to start. I'm interested in making sure that the addition echoes and complements the historical portion of the building. That's my biggest concern.
Okay, great. Anyone else?
Yeah, my name is Richard Fisher. I can tell you what I envision, what I fantasize about, which is a little gem of a glass box separated from the old building by some kind of transparency, so the old building still shows up, but this thing doesn't try to fight with it or imitate it in any way. I think trying to complement it is really, I've seen so many bad additions to. I have a background in aesthetic things. I'm a painter. I studied architecture, a graphic designer. So I have, I think about this kind of stuff. Anyway, so I look at buildings, I look at additions and stuff. I say, oh, that's really good. Sometimes they're just amazing because they're just. I think it needs to be as strong as this building also. So I'll shut up now.
Perfect.
Not me. I'm
Yeah.
Kat Copeland. And yeah, I'm just interested to hear people's feedbacks. Mostly I'm like trying to get as much community messaging across, like just hearing what people want. I learned a lot in the first part of the design elements in terms of like the exterior, but it is a challenge and not really the norm nowadays to match like more brick on brick. Like I learned that as part of the process with Ben and with Andrew, because when the first images came up that it wasn't matching the exterior, and I was like, why is that? And they said that nowadays, a lot of times with historical buildings, just like Frank was saying, you try to delineate what's been added. So now I've been really paying attention in my day-to-day and just came from Quebec, which has a lot of kind of historical things, and seeing kind of modern things added to it and seeing that juxtaposition, which I like, but I know that there's a lot of different opinions that are going to go into it. So I'm just here to learn and then hopefully try to get as much community feedback and impact as possible.
I guess my only feedback would be, from the building commission, I want to make sure everything meets code and works that way. But also, long-term maintenance, and, the building will
Yeah.
won't cost
course.
much to take care of
Yeah.
and stuff.
Great, thank you.
I'm Andrew Grote. I'm an architect. I've worked on libraries, historic and new, and done additions and renovations and all kinds of things.
Right on.
We've met. So I think to Kat's point, the National Trust for Historic Preservation says you shouldn't match a historic building. And sometimes when you do try to match it or try to make it like, let's say you did an addition, it's kind of like this postmodern stucco thing, it looks like a pale imitation. But I do like compliment, which I heard, because I think it needs to stand on its own. I like the idea of something modern because I think you should look backwards and forwards. We're somewhere along this linear path of the history of Stowe. And, you know, this was built in 1893 for the population then. The population exploded in the 70s when the addition was put on. And probably as many people have lived here since 1976 as before. So in a way, that addition being of its time made sense, but it was not a good addition. It was not a good example of 70s modern architecture, and it was not sensitive at all to the existing building. It was just kind of glommed on.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm sure some people probably felt like that in 1976 when all these neighborhoods started getting built with these mid-century modern things, like what's going after my tent. And that was an embodiment of that. So this library should like reflect the identity of the town. And I think having a good balance with the existing building, and this is an opportunity to restore a lot of the existing building and to bring a lot of it back. Because, you know, through subtraction and just looking at the color and the character of it and really have it complement it. And whatever the addition looks like, I think it should be of its time. And it should be, because this was of its time too, but it was a really good example of architecture of its time. There are a lot of things built in 1893 which are not grounding, but great libraries are. So this is something that will last another 100 years.
I love all of that. Thank you.
Well, I'm on to keep it in budget. That's my only goal is whatever
And
we
that's
do
not
exterior, we
budgeted.
stay within our budget.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just talking about the exterior, because I'm on my committee.
Looks funny from the outside.
Yes, it should be welcoming. And I love that the plans restore the front door on a lot of these types of libraries where you've got this grand entrance. It was no longer feasible, and restoring that, I think is huge.
Yeah,
So that was the front door, now it's a window.
Yeah.
that's right. Yep, exactly. Well, Tina?
Well, I mean, obviously I care what it looks like on the outside, but for me, it's more the indoor space, so I don't really, I mean, as long as it's not like, you know, neon green, I think I'm good.
Okay, well, you can keep clicking through, Denise, unless I missed anybody. Yeah, cool. And we'll come back at the end because we just talked goals. We are going to talk about the Secretary of the Interior standards. There's a number of governing agencies that kind of describe exactly what you just did. And then we'll share some precedents with you of mostly our work, but some other work. And just, again, have a dialogue, like what resonates with you all and what do you like and what don't you like. And we just want to hear all of that. And then our goal, or part of our goal for him today, is to walk away and start to establish some guiding principles of what it is that we're trying to achieve through this edition and its character. So we had on the next slide just some photos of the existing building to talk about if we needed to, as we talk about goals. But I think, you know, the key thing that we all know is that the 70s edition is coming down. And that's going to allow that historic piece, the 1895 building, really sort of sit proudly perched on Library Hill again and not kind of be absorbed by this 70s edition. And we want to add on to it in a way that sort of celebrates that. And another, we'll talk about this later, but I'll mention it here just because the photo on the left is a good one to understand it. You know, the first floor of the 70s edition sits off the sidewalk in the grade by whatever that is, 4.5 feet or so. And it's one of our goals to lower that in this new edition. One, to give more height floor to floor in the new edition and still tie into the existing second floor. But also that helps immensely with the landscape and how you can then enter the building in a nice universally accessible path, hopefully, from parking and from the street. So just keep that in mind, because that'll come up again a little later when we talk through the plans. We can,
I have
oh, sure.
Is the intent to restore the main entrance to the old main entrance? Or is it just gonna be a door, but not the, or haven't you thought about
Do you
that?
mean?
Well, it'll certainly be an entrance. That is the goal. Whether or not is the main entrance, I think it will serve as an entrance. I think just given the proximity to parking, I feel like people will naturally go through the addition entrance, but there will still be an fully accessible path to the original entrance. For those who wish to use it, or for those who are coming from that part of the site.
Because your house can have a nice front door, but you're going into the garage.
Yeah.
But like the
Yeah.
kids from Hale will
Yeah.
probably
But
use
that's-
that.
yeah,
door,
exactly.
it'll
No,
be
you don't-
What did you
there.
say?
Great.
I missed what you
Oh,
said.
like your house could have a great front door, but
Right.
you're going into the garage.
Right.
But to your point, the kids come from
Yes,
Hale.
we
all
talked
the
about
time,
that with the
And they'll
staff.
use this new entrance.
And there has been talk potentially about that lot at the old fire station, sort of kitty corner, being a potential overflow parking. So, if people are coming from that direction, I think they'll just path of least resistance will be to come through that restored original entry.
But
Can
I
I
think
ask-
too,
Sorry.
just if you want to get to the next slide, Denise, you'll see in the historical photo that the door is set back. There is a kind of an exterior vestibule. We don't plan to restore it that way, just to maintain the square footage that's there now. We get a bit more space that way, and the way just the flooring's been done and everything. It would be best to have either a full-on vestibule or have a almost translucent entryway within that arched opening. So.
Yeah, it's very prudent to have an airlock.
So in other words, right inside the current window, there's actual stuff going on, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And we plan to take advantage of that space on the interior.
We can't afford to give it that.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, honestly, even like 25 square feet, somebody would say, oh, how'd we lose 25 square feet? That's nice.
But you can see it's getting another nice moment of that original photo in the middle there, is that the base of the turret is exposed. And that's sort of been absorbed in the earth in the 70s edition. So we're hoping to bring that sort of prominence back to that corner.
I just wanted to ask, was there ever a world in which that fire station parking lot was actually like primary parking rather than overflow parking? Is that an option?
At this point, no.
Some of that would be ADA compliance, wouldn't it? You can't have the parking lot be that far away for something
Right,
that needs
yeah.
accessibility.
And we're not sure in the future of what that site is gonna be.
Yeah, sorry, that was more of a what if scenario. But the Hale students, there is a good, sort of young adult teen population that comes from the school. So I think that door would be used by quite a few folks.
And neighbors, I mean, there's
yeah.
it's a neighborhood, vibrant walking neighborhood and.
So the next two slides, it's sort of already been said, and we said it before during our concept design and feasibility study. There are a lot of sort of higher sort of governing agencies that maintain and own a lot of historic properties that set forth standards for different levels of restoration and rehabilitation. So this is from the Secretary of the Interior standards, and if you click forward, we've just excerpted a little bit out of it here, but it's the takeaway is that you want an addition to allow the original building to be retained. And being the sort of the historic building is differentiated with the addition. So there's a distinction between the two. And then it should also be designed in that last sentence that, if this addition were ever to come down, that the original character and integrity of the historic building could be maintained. So that's one of many agencies that sort of talks in this type of language where we're not, they don't recommend mimicking or trying to recreate the historic character and using all of the brownstone and the masonry and the stone and all of that. It's, that's not the recommendation.
So I have an interpretation question, because the first sentence says that the new addition must preserve the building's historic character. Shouldn't it say must preserve the original building's historic character? Because I could take that as saying I gotta build something that looks like the old one.
A lot of these are, like, when you go in front of these boards, they actually do end up being quite subjective. But the intent of this is all about the original building, so.
Yeah, and preserving the original.
Right,
building.
preserving the
addition
original
here,
building. Okay,
yeah,
right, original, okay.
Yeah, it's,
I think we talked about this last time, but we don't have, we're not a historic district, right? Like, we don't have to run this by the MHC or anything
No.
like that. Okay.
no, I mean, it may be something you consider
Is it a
getting it
a
listed
landmark?
under the, but it's
Except
not,
they're not always super easy to work with.
Is it a historic landmark building?
it's not
Or
registered.
registered?
So Andrew will share a couple sort of thoughts here on the next slide, Denise, just on sort of what things we need to be considering when we talk about the exterior composition.
Oh, I recognize that.
Yeah, so the exterior of a structure is informed by, more than just the material, more than just the glass on the outsides. We, of course, do consider the material, but also the landscape on the outside. The interior program will often define a significant part of that. The context surrounding the area, in this case, the woods or the historical building right next door, also views for the exterior program, and the massing as well will be a huge part of that, and then how the materials will actually work with the massing. All things that have to be considered when actually designing in addition or just a building in general. So I'm assuming you guys all have questions about the context building. That one is just for, like, that building is in Germany and it points to where the Allied planes, the direction the Allied planes came from, and that drove the entire building and the entire design of the exterior. So it's a little on the nose, but it's a great precedent.
It's just to say that there's a lot of things that are going to be helping us define what this exterior character is. It's not just picking, wood or masonry or glass and saying like, that's what we're going to do. There's lots of things that are going to inform how the building is composed. And it's going to go through an iterative process, just like the plans will. And we'll be sharing lots of ideas and developing it as we go.
I have a question. I know that top left building quite well. And so my question is, because I didn't hear this before, is this going to be a LEED certified edition, or is it LEED concerning at least, even if it doesn't get certification? Is that part of the goal here?
So it's not our understanding that we're actually going to be going through the LEED certification process, but I will say as it's just a matter of our practice at Design Lab. I mean, we are inherently aware of the built environment's impact on our natural environment, and we are very conscientious of that. So even though that we, won't be going through and meeting all of the check boxes and going through all of the sort of dogmatic processes that LEED requires, I think it's comfortable to
It'll
say.
be
that
certifiable, but
you'll
not
have a-
certified.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, I like that.
And that's not an uncommon approach when
Yeah,
it comes to
yeah.
LEED.
It's like organic versus certified organic,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's really a pain to be certified, so.
Just a question related to that. So like Stowe is one of the few towns in Massachusetts that doesn't adopt the stretch energy code. So if you determine what energy code you're designing to.
Not
so, yeah.
that I'm.
Yeah. My understanding was Stowe was a green.
We are a green community. We have
do-
adopted the stretch.
We
energy
do use
code.
the stretch
And the
code, yeah.
plan is-
An old map.
The plan is to adopt the
Yeah.
new energy code at this coming town meeting is the
So-
Green Advisory
So
Committee is planning to
that
put that
alone
forward.
will get it beyond what would have been
Yeah.
LEED platinum 10 years ago.
Sure.
So it's gonna be much better than it was. But related question for the existing building, it's tough to insulate existing buildings.
Yeah.
I'm sure these walls are really thick masonry. Are we replacing the windows?
The windows were recently
There are
replaced
replacements like windows.
within the past 5-10
Yeah,
years.
and do you think, just pretty much work with the existing walls without
I,
burning out the
I-
inside.
that was our approach during the concept design. It's immensely invasive to tear out all of that
It sure is,
plaster and
yeah.
get into the insulation. We've done that on projects where just the budget frankly allows for it, but it's incredibly invasive. But alternatively, I mean, we're working on a similar vintage project right up at Phillips Exeter Academy. And we're not doing the walls, but we are insulating the underside of the roof.
Yeah, that makes
And
a
that,
huge
and that has
difference.
a big impact. So that might be something we look, really consider strongly here.
Almost half the surface area.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then, so, with just new systems and the new building meeting current or the next code, it's gonna be so much better than the pre-energy crisis 1976 envelopes. Gonna save a lot of operating costs.
And my understanding, like from the concept designs and maybe even talking with other firms, was getting a LEED certification would be a huge challenge because of the historic part of the building.
It would, it
Yeah,
adds a
that
lot of
was what the-
complexity to it.
what
Um,
was
It's
making
not to
it
say it's
such
not
a challenge.
impossible, but, and I don't want to be a naysayer towards LEED because it's a very important part of, building, but it does require a lot. It's just a lot of process and a lot of paperwork and a lot of forms, and that does add a lot of design time and oversight during construction.
We'd be
Money.
losing money. just trying to-
No, I just said, yeah, money is what.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd be
You'd be
losing
getting
money
the
to
same
do the rest of the
products,
building,
but
and not
spending
getting
more.
more.
I'm sorry?
You'd be getting the same product, but basically spending more
Right,
to
yeah,
check
right.
off, to check the boxes, so.
So we're next going to cycle just through a series of, projects of our own work. And we just can go through them pretty quickly and we'll just say one or two things about them. But if you guys have any reaction to them, then, that's sort of the point to again hear from all of you. So this project is actually nearly 20 years old. In addition to one of the Providence branch libraries, and that the piece in the front with the glass that's got the kind of fritted letters on it and the brick base was actually built against the historic building, which you can see just behind it. That's where the chimney is at the top of that gable roof. And on the left, you can see where one of the entrances was actually encapsulated within this sort of new kind of enclosed front porch of the building. We'll have all of these as an array at the end too, so if we want to come back to anything, we can. This was a project almost as old, about just around 2000, 2002. A major renovation to the Hyde Park Branch Library in the city of Boston. Very neoclassical historic building on the left, and then the addition on the right. And here you can obviously tell it's a new addition, but the way the coursing of the base extends, the coursing of the windows, where the roof is, it's very much in tune with the massing of the original building. And then on the right, you can start to get a sense of, again, it's not just about the materials, how the landscape informed the exterior design and creating those small little intimate reading spaces was part of the conversation and the intent of this composition.
This is a project of ours as well. The Walnut Hill Art Center is adding dance studios to an existing building. And you can start to see where the materials are kind of picked off, where the slate shingle of the original building is then used as siding on the new building, and the kind of uniquely sloped roof is riffed on in the massing of the addition as well.
What year is the original building for this one?
Oh gosh, I don't
Tom, do
remember
you
that.
know?
It was early 1900s.
It's gorgeous.
It's, yeah,
Where
that's,
is this? Walnut Hill, it's in
Uh,
Framingham, isn't it?
Natick,
Natick?
Natick, yeah. Yeah, it's the Walnut Hill School for the Arts. So it was they've got a big performance venue in that old barn, and then we added what you see onto the right there. And it's hard to see, but Andrew mentioned it, like the gray in the images on the left, that's actually slate that's used. It's the same slate that was used on the original roof that we then pulled into the composition of the new addition.
And there's also some rhythm as well. You can like plainly see in the old building and the windows that is more repetitive in the new building. Whiten Observatory was a rather small addition, adding classrooms onto an observatory. And this was more focused on reflecting the arboretum behind and also having classroom views extended out into the arboretum. And so those classrooms became a little more, felt a little larger just with that extension of the views.
Where is that?
It's at Wellesley College.
Oh,
West Branch Library, which Ben and I hold near and dear to our hearts, which we've presented to you guys many times, I believe. But here there's many of those opportunities. The copper came from the idea of the roof, which at the time, copper was very often used in the early 1900s as a roofing material. So we put new copper on the roof, but we also used it as siding on the addition. And in the back, it was all glass, and basically the whole wall opened up into the landscape. So that interior program also became an exterior program. In that they used that for story time, indoor and outdoor story time, as well as concerts and stuff.
How big is that addition?
It's pretty modest. It was like it's like 3,000 square feet. And we also, the kind of earthy quality of the addition between the copper, and it's a little hard to see, but the stone at the base, and then the landscape materials. I mean, we were picking up on all of the sort of tans and buffs that were in the original sort of masonry palette.
And then we have a few projects from afar, both in Europe, but they're great examples of transparent and opaque materials. The one on the left is all glass, but it is glass that was chosen to reflect the building, the existing building, and so it actually extends that building without copying it at all. And the building on the right chose to copy the massing, but use a new material that doesn't take away from the detail of the historic building.
I'm curious about the one on the left, that center arch part, is that part of the old building or is that created?
That's part of the old building, I believe.
Denise, would you mind clicking back? Because we didn't see the Concord Museum. Did we? Go back one more. Yeah, so stop there for a moment. Oh, go forward. Sorry, thank you. So this is right up the street in Concord. This was an addition to the Concord Museum that we completed probably 4 or 5 years ago. The Concord Museum in and of itself has had a number of additions over the years. It started, you can't even see it on this building. It's on the other side of the red brick. The sort of little building is what it was referred to. And then that was added onto, and then there was an 80s addition. And then there was a barn that they kind of built that we ultimately determined, with everybody's guidance and collaboration, that barn would be removed and we would add this new education wing. You can see, we a lot of local natural stone that was picked up based on the stone walls that were already on the property. The sort of rhythm and the spacing of the addition picked up on the spacing of the windows in the original building and composition, but it obviously feels very distinct in terms of its character.
And this did have to go through a historic district,
This
like
did.
a town committee,
It did.
plus also the MHC, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And as did a few of these projects, West Branch
Yeah.
did as
Yeah,
well.
West Branch did. So anyway, I think that was sort of the grouping. And then if you click forward, Denise.
Can I just ask a question about the Concord Museum?
Sure.
What was the neighborhood reaction to, like, because that's even more hyper historic than in our area.
It was mixed. I mean, there was a lot of strong support, especially by, in this case, the donors and the trustees and then the museum board. They were obviously all very supportive of the design, and there were many town administrators and, folks who held positions within the town who were very supportive of it. But, there were some people who drove by it who didn't share that reaction. And I think, it's, want to sound more optimistic than pessimistic. I mean, we're very confident in designing something that will feel like it fits in Stowe, but we're not going to have every single person in the town of Stowe jumping for joy. And that's just the nature of designing in a public setting.
This is kind of an opportunity though to say, what does it mean to be from Stowe? I mean, Stowe and Concord are more alike than Stowe and Elm Hamlet, but they're different, they're different, right? And you think Concord and Lexington, and there's like a real history and there's an architecture that you definitely associate with that. And Stowe doesn't have as clearly defined a history. It doesn't have as much built architecture. It doesn't have that many built new buildings that,
Yeah.
that really define it. So this is an opportunity to kind of say like why this is Stowe and not Acton.
Sure.
Harvard.
Denise, if you click forward, going, and the next slide, I think, yeah, so this is just a kind of an array for you all. I mean, we can click back to other images, but these were all, most of these were all shown on previous, not all of them, but most, and we can click back to others, but it'd be nice to just sort of reflect on these, and hear from all of you.
So most of these are yours, except for the two you showed us from your.
In this arrangement, there are a few more that are
What- I'm
projects from the
curious
East
about the one with
Coast.
the yellow taxi in front of it. What is that?
That is the Morgan Library in New York. The addition is by Renzo.
You guys
Piano.
did that?
We
Oh,
did not,
that's
no.
really nice. Okay, thank you.
But that's kind of the reaction that we're looking to get from
Great.
you all about these images, so.
What's the one in the middle right?
It's
Middle
beautiful.
right, that is an addition to a student center at RISD by a firm called Work AC.
It's cool because it has similar structure to what Randall might have.
Oh, the far right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's Woburn Library, actually.
Yeah.
We're gonna be a little limited in the amount of glass we can show, right? Because some of these buildings that are 10, 20 years old, they have a lot of glass and it's per the new energy code.
Yeah.
You need to keep the glazing percentage down.
Yep.
And the fact that the original building doesn't have a lot of windows is helping the new one, but it can't be a total glass box.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you're absolutely
Oh,
right.
is that
but-
Oh.
Well,
I
I think,
mean, and that glass box in the middle, that's like the one over the arches. That's probably not all vision glass. It's probably a very small percentage. It might not be any vision glass. it might just
Very
be
likely,
glass
yeah,
glass.
there's another wall
It's a
behind it.
blank
It's
box.
just the middle, kind of
It's
50 or
actually really
60%,
lines,
yeah.
Andrew, you are speaking the words that I do not understand, my friend. What vision glass meaning you can look out
They
of
can
it
see through
like a
versus,
window
yeah, so if you look at the
versus just
Hancock
an
Tower
exterior.
down-
Yes,
downtown,
yes.
half of that you could see through at night. So when
Yeah.
the lights turn on, you can see half it. The other half, you can't see through at all. That's the spandrel glass. So it's all glass, but only some of it is vision glass you can see through.
Gotcha.
So the middle right, where you've got a big glass
Yeah.
cone box, is probably gonna be more light than you could or even would want in an addition this big.
well, and I think that was the revolt of the community, as they did not want just a glass box that
Yeah.
was attached to the side of the building, because the first design had a lot of glass. That I think that's what turned some of the folks off as not being historic
Well-
enough for the center.
To counter that, the Hyde Park Library in the bottom left,
Beautiful.
it's beautiful. I mean, that is the epitome of like a modern addition to a historic building. And one of the reasons it works is because there's a little buffer zone
Yes.
Right.
that breaks
Yep.
off, that is sensitive,
Do you
neutral.
have an enlargement of that one?
Yeah,
Yeah, we saw
You
that.
can
the receipts
click
back. There's a lot of glass, but that glass box isn't just a generic glass box like a 1985 Office Park
Right.
glass box. It's really thoughtfully proportioned. It matches the rhythm of the shelves coming through, and you can't see this, but the original building is based on classical proportions of golden sections of things all related to each other, and you can superimpose a geometry on it that reveals the hidden proportional relationship of why the windows are as big as they are, like why that door looks just right, and why everything looks just right. And that same geometry was superimposed on the addition to space it out, and that's why it just feels, even though it's not punched windows, it feels well proportioned.
Yeah.
It feels in scale with that building. It's a balance.
Yeah.
I'm not advocating this specifically. This is in the city of Boston, not in Stowe, but it's a really good example of having modern and old complementing each other.
So I'm curious about that. The original there's a blank brick wall between the old building and the new one. And there's a matching one on the other side. Were those added? Yeah, there.
That was added.
That, and was there one added to complement on the other side, or is that old?
Yeah, that was added too, I believe. Yeah, yeah.
Really? Yeah, it's really nice. I just want to understand.
So they reinforce the symmetry while
Yeah.
going off
Yeah.
to the right.
Why wouldn't you, why would you put a flat roof? Why wouldn't you try to echo more the shape of the original?
There's details in the cornice there that you wanna complement and show the craftsmanship in that rather than and take away from it by copying it. And so they actually hold down the roof below that, the eave of the original roof to show that original eve even more, rather than copy it or even go above that level. Because now you can see the roof is kind of shown more that way, I think.
That's a really good question, and I think it comes up a lot in these, in all the additions, some of them, particularly in Concord, you have the
Yeah,
roof.
that,
Even as you had to put a big dormer in, because there's actually a floor there, but the end looked like a roof, because that's so much the language of Concord and colonial. And I think in Boston, this was trying to be more modern. I can see that green kind of cornice going above it, and if they meeting no, they slope them.
Even if they look flat.
Yeah, we're very good at building flat roofs now.
but I think to your,
But I'd expect to see examples of both.
exactly, I think to your inquiry, I don't think there's anything that would say right out of the gate that we
So that
wouldn't
the style doesn't
consider
just pile up.
picking up on some of the geometry of Randall's roof lines and slopes. So I think we'd want to look at that.
You guys do this?
We did. This was actually our founding partner, Bob, who had,
Makes me.
you may remember,
Or
So-
if that's
so-
roofs done.
Not putting a pitched roof on this makes it more deferential to the existing building.
Yeah.
And it reinforces the initial symmetry of that entrance and creates a hierarchy.
yeah. So this,
Also
just,
huge.
Hmm?
Also huge.
It would be a huge roof. Yeah, because of the size. That's a good point.
When you were designing, I know that I'm not on the design part of the committee, but just out of curiosity, when you did the first iteration, did you consider having any of the windows arch to match the arch of the door, just out of curiosity? Was it just terrible, or was it?
It's just, we hadn't refined it enough to actually show a decent option that way. And there are cost implications on arches as well, but.
It's a lot more
that is
expensive
something
to
we're
have
gonna-
that exist, you mean? Like if that's.
Are there multiple
Yeah.
arch windows in the existing, or is it only the arch entrance?
it's mostly,
I think it's just the entrance.
it's just the entrance,
Yeah.
yeah. It's just the big arch of the entry. Yeah.
We have hand sketches of that, even some on
I
the
think-
computer, but
The original, I know the exterior vignettes that came out of the concept design effort, kind of got people's attention, but I think it's important to know that those were designed very quickly and like without this dialogue. And just given the nature of the process and the fee that was available and like, it was just a starting.
I love it. I'm not, I mean, if that is what happened, I would be thrilled. So
Yeah.
I'm not one of the, 11 people in town that complained about it.
I think it's
I'm
great
very
that we're,
loudly,
like,
so.
we're here having a dialogue and we'll, when we get into actually designing the exterior, we'll probably have a version that looks quite similar to what was in concept design and several others, and we'll talk through those. We had one more slide to share before we shift gears to the,
Can I point out one more thing on that one there?
Sure.
Is that that glass box floats. It sticks out a little bit and
Mhm.
it cantilevers above, and there's a base on the bottom. There's a whole floor down there with punched windows in that.
right,
And
and that ties directly
that's a
into the,
really nice connection in between there as you're playing with section. And in this building, there's a big base and the turret kind of transcends it, and there's a roof, all these different parts, and there's opportunities to connect or offset from that as we go down the hill.
Yeah.
And have a lower entrance.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting with that turret.
Do you happen
Yeah,
to
the way that
know
works.
what the function is of that base, like in that library?
It's mostly staff spaces and sort of meeting rooms.
Yeah.
But we also like, it's subtler here, and you were mentioning in one of your very first comments, like this idea of some transitioning bit between the historic piece and then the composition of the addition. We, we refer those to a gasket or, whatever word you want to use. But I think, that will be something that we'll want to explore because we don't want our addition to just kind of jam right up into this, especially given Randall's composition with that turret
That's what
condition.
the current one does.
Yeah, it rams into it and then doesn't.
Does there have to be like a firewall
Yeah.
or anything in between?
Sorry?
Will there have to be a firewall or anything in between what is newly?
No, I mean, well, no, not from a code perspective. It'll function as one building because we'll be sprinklering the whole thing. We'll have to be very careful in all of our detailing as these, two different types of buildings and two building structures come together. So there'll be, expansion conditions and that kind of thing from a detailing perspective, but no firewalls.
And Denise, you said we do not have to worry about lighting codes, like, we won't have to, if we do have a lot of glass, we won't have to install shades that go down at a certain time or anything like that. We don't have that. You could check with Frank behind you.
As far as interior lights?
Yeah, like for the Concord Library, we had to install shades that went down automatically at dusk because the neighbors were so worried about light pollution and like all of the lights had to point up in the air. The skylight actually also had to have a shade that went across it at night. I'm just curious if there's things like that here.
Not to that degree, no. Yeah, but we deal with outdoor lighting. But interior lighting,
Okay.
so, as long as I don't want to light up the outside of the building.
Well, one lead common thing is a cutoff in the lights so that they just go down instead of up. The ones in this picture go up. But that's it.
Night sky friendly is
Yeah.
one term that's used.
Yeah.
That can be on the exterior.
Yeah, for exterior lights.
Yeah, we don't allow lights pointing up on the
Yeah, so
exterior.
we don't do that anymore.
Yeah,
Denise, would you mind going to slide 25?
sometimes.
Yeah, so this is just one more composition. This was not necessarily about building form or massing, but it's more just a composition of materials and how those different materials might come together. So in this instance, this is all our work from over the years in different contexts and settings. You see the Concord Museum there. You see a snippet in the middle at the bottom. That's the Walnut Hill School where you see the slate and you see some white cedar siding and glass. The one to the right of that is actually a crematorium that we did for the town of Duxbury quite some time ago. That was clad in natural cedar and just sort of let to weather on its own. The image all the way in the bottom right, that's from the University of Maine up at their Emory campus. It's a community arts center. It's hard to see in that photo, but everything on the right is all just vertical whitewash cedar that's meant to weather naturally. Bottom left is the Arkell Museum. That's white masonry. That's actually white brick on a stone base.
Where is that?
That's in upstate New York. The one in the upper right is from Quinnipiac. That's a health and wellness center we just finished. That's got a combination of stone and masonry. You see a little snippet of West Branch there with the copper. And then on the left, upper left, that's another view from the crematorium in Duxbury. And that's a flat lock metal siding on that portion of the building. So we'll start to explore all of these with you. I mean, obviously the predominant cladding material at the time of Randall wasn't, red brick. That was special for the library, but most houses and buildings at the time were wood constructed with clapboard siding. So we'll look to riff on that as a potential material. But
Brick sent a message of permanence, right?
absolutely, yeah, it's just stone, and copper and other metals are very long lasting and minimal maintenance. Wood isn't as long lasting and can, depending on what type of wood, require refinishing, which can become a maintenance challenge over the years.
Couple things I like about this composition. First of all, it's all beautiful work. And I think it's modern, but clearly contextual. and of its town and of its, you can tell they're from different regions in the Northeast. And also, for solid portions, it's never just like some big blank expanse, like the brick that we've got now
Mhm.
on the addition. There's a rhythm to it. You know, the wood and the top metal or the copper or even though that's brick on the bottom left is still kind of panelized to kind of break it up. And then the way that they all hit the ground, because even if it's not made out of a giant permanent like material, like a temple or something, like that copper over stone, and then even the brick one for the Arkell, looks like there's some stone, it's like upstate New York.
Yeah,
Stone
exactly,
kind of
yep.
by the entrance there, and so I think those are really thoughtful details about
A few of these
how it sits
details, I'm sorry.
there.
A few of these materials, they also age with the building. So
Yeah.
copper oxidizes and changes color over time. And it kind of, if you think about it, like it does change with the community and grows to become a part of it as well. Same thing with wood, it changes color, it ages, maybe gets a little grayer, just like we all do. So that was one huge reason for using copper on West Branch as well. Especially the copper oxidizes differently depending on where it is in the country, so it's just really interesting.
I'm just gonna interrupt for a minute. For the minutes, Morgan just joined us
Oh, thank
remotely.
you.
Does copper cost like a fortune though to?
I think all building materials cost a fortune
Yeah,
right this
everything's
minute.
Yeah, that's true.
It
I
is-
guess I'm just like,
Dirt is expensive right now.
It is a
Yes,
costly
yeah.
material, there's no doubt about it, but it is incredibly long lasting and there's
like
And so-
maintenance
and
wise,
so
it's
beautiful.
pretty easy. Yeah.
But, you know, using the Concord Museum as an example, we did a lot of stonework there, and I think your comments about how stone can pull into the landscape and that, you know, it's not just the building, right? That's why we talked about landscaping and landscape informing the building, because we want that all to feel together as sort of one. But in that instance, we did a lot of stonework, but the white was actually frankly hardy plank type siding. You know, very cost effective, as you say.
So
We-
your house cat.
we kind of detailed it in a way that's not necessarily, you know, typical, but it was a very sort of off the shelf product that kind of countered the sort of expense of the stonework.
I think a lot of it too is people just getting acclimated to something. I mean, I worked in Concord during your entire Concord Museum project, and I was working on the library project, which had potentially more controversy. We were actually sued and had to stop for a year. It was by a neighbor who was a trustee of the library. Anyway, I think for a lot of people, you know, driving down Lexington Road looked really different for a while. And then 6 months in, it started to feel a
Right.
little more comfortable, and a year in. And then now when they drive by it is just the Concord Museum, and it's everything that they feel warm and comfortable about. And so I think that people's initial reactions often are, wait, that's too much,
Yeah,
that's too
change,
different.
it's
I've
change,
been
yeah.
living here since I was 2 years old. I don't like that. But I think some of it is just, you know, getting acclimated to something, feeling comfortable in it, going inside it and feeling how it works and all that other stuff, that people will come along on a process, even if they were, you know, objecting to it initially.
Love that. Yeah, well said. I mean, it's just, it is people's natural reaction to change, and as something becomes, it's in place longer, it just becomes more permanent and you won't become more used to it, and then reaches a point where it's there.
And I
That's-
think
that's it.
libraries in particular feel to a lot of people like they have ownership of it. That's my library. And I think people want to feel like they have a really strong say in something that they have ownership on.
Yeah, well, it's a community building, you know, it's like, it's the heart of the community. I mean, that's why.
But it's a more visited community building than most other
Yeah.
community buildings.
Absolutely. Yeah, and people feel as if it's partially their own.
And you don't have to pay to go in.
Free and open to all. That's right. It's okay.
Okay, well, this is wonderful. So we're from this going to start to establish some guiding principles. We'll share those with you based on this conversation, and we'll be able to react to those next time we're together. But we should switch gears in the interest of time to the sort of building committee portion of the conversation tonight. By all means, if more comments come to mind, share them. with Denise or Tina, they'll get them to us. And also think about, we talked about it at the beginning when we were looking at the work plan. We'd like to go on a field trip with all of you. There's some buildings that we have in mind that might be beneficial to go look at, like the Concord Museum's not far, or the Waltham Library. That's not ours, but that's also not that far. So it might be a fun afternoon adventure in March to go do that.
And you did Woburn, you said?
We did not.
You did not.
No, we did not. No.
And I can probably coordinate, we have a 20-passenger van, so if it's something I can coordinate with the Council on Aging, we can all go as one to our field trips.
Three of us.
Yes.
We can probably get Nance to cater that.
To Kat's, one of Kat's points, at what point do we start to talk about community input? And how are we gonna gather community input and make sure that, you know, we have an opportunity for people to speak about the different designs? I think that's what I'm there.
So if I think some of that is just the exterior design committee's conversation, maybe with, even without design lab, to have a public meeting and solicit input and have people come in and give you some ideas, and then you could report back at a meeting. I mean, you certainly can come there, but I think as an exterior design committee, we should be having those conversations about, do we want to put something on the website and collect some feedback? How do we want to reach the community? I know Marcy thinks there were only 11 people. I got a lot of complaints leading up to town meeting and the election about the building. And it's the folks who've lived in town forever. It's the folks that the center resonates with the library, and it's a historical center. So I think there should be some type of outreach. So if it's not on the schedule, I think we as a committee should be doing that separately to make sure that people have an opportunity. I mean, people had an opportunity to join the committee and people were not banging down the door, but at least we've done our due diligence. That was the promise we made. We will solicit feedback. We will hear from people before we have a final design. So
Can you just remind me what the mechanism or the process is going to be for approval from the town on this project?
it's all done.
It's done. Yeah.
That's right, it's all done.
So that's why, so
Isn't
a
that
couple
wonderful?
things.
It doesn't seem possible, but okay.
So a
Join
couple
it right
things.
there, just at the right time.
Unlike every other project, okay.
Yeah, so the reason that was done is because this year there is going to be a $250-ish million high school project coming down the line,
That's right.
which we knew about last year.
That's right.
We could not pit the projects against each other because quite frankly, the library would not have succeeded, in my opinion. Additionally, you know, there's some other projects, some other things were going on. So timing wise, it made the most sense to go for one shot for the full design funds and the construction funds, where we knew we had an opportunity to get that vote. But as part of that, that's why we did so much outreach with telling people that we would continue to solicit input. If they voted for the project, we would then come back to them and say, what would you like to see? How would you like to see this? So the approvals are done, which is part of some of our budget constraints, is now we have our ceiling, what was already voted on through the debt exclusion.
And I think a lot of like the public forums and soliciting feedback before the design, like initial design, was really based a lot on function versus
Right.
actual physicality of the building.
Mhm.
So I think that's why the feedback has been since then, like since the concept design went to town meeting, to try to refine that look more, because people felt like their voices were heard in terms of what was going to happen in the interior,
Mhm.
but not necessarily what was going to happen on the exterior.
And also people start to pay more attention in April than they
That is
did in
true.
February, when they had time really to
Yeah, that's
influence it in some way. And so they were just like, wait, this is the first time we've seen this and we have to vote on it next weekend type of reaction.
Right, because even the preliminary meetings, there was not a ton of resident participation.
But they
People
could have,
weren't-
they were
could-
open
oh,
meetings,
absolutely,
they were,
could have.
there were a couple, two
That's
public
normal
forums, more
for
than
them to be.
one.
There was several, I mean, they were all public meetings, but yes, public forums.
The slides are up on the town website, on the library website, newsletters, poster boards, like it was out there for people who wanted to see it.
And vote wise,
There was.
proportionately, was it a strong?
Overwhelmingly, it was
Overwhelming.
overwhelming. Both town meeting was almost unanimous. I think only a handful of no's at town meeting, and the ballot was overwhelmingly in favor. And that was you know, people in town know we need a new library. It needs to be rent. That's how we got the buy-in is commit to saying we need to do this. Let us work in the process and what it's gonna look like. But people knew, I mean, it rains in the building. I mean, people know that and see that. So that was the easy part because we need to do it. So part of the trade-off was now we'll do this process. Not this process, obviously, but the exterior design process.
And it had not passed 11 years prior, right? 2011?
I think twice prior. it
Sort
did
of
not.
overwhelmingly had not passed. Not this exact same project, but a renovation project. You know, it just, nobody had any appetite for it in 2011. And so it took
Well,
10 years of sort of ramping up, thinking, bringing in a fantastic new library director with energy to take it on,
Yeah.
all of those other things to get it done.
but 2011, think about when that was in the wake of the Great
Right.
Recession.
After
people's
2008.
appetites for,
And frankly, the town has changed. I moved here in 2010. The town has changed drastically
right.
since the, I mean, it's a ton more families.
We were
There's
up against
there's a new town administrator, there's, right, center school was then, but there's a lot more families now. That, you know, this was not a commute to Boston town 15 years ago. Now, one person from many families commutes into Boston. You know, the median house price is massively different today than it was in 2011. All of that stuff has impacted it.
A big part of communicating this project to the community is these two committees speaking correctly to the community as well without misrepresenting what conversations we're having. We've had projects where the community kind of starts to, the rumors start to spread and it gets complicated, and then we have community meetings and they're not productive because of the way the community has been informed of, misinformed of the project. So it is important that you guys do and kind of inform the community of the conversations we're having and the process that we're working through, so that we
Right.
can stay on track with everybody and without starting to hit these speed bumps, unnecessary speed bumps.
So just on that, so there is a page on our website dedicated to this project. We post the agenda, we post the minutes, and we post the link to every Zoom. So people have this one-stop shopping. I think we talked about, John, with you originally, that when we start to get updates, those will be posted in the same location. So all of us to our respective committees, resident groups can direct everybody to one spot and all the information is there. So that no one has to go out and search for it, or my version is different than Tina's version. It's all in that one location. So that folks can go and, again, you know, the argument before was, well, we didn't know, and we didn't, how many people actually go and watch them? I mean, we have, you know, one member of the public here tonight, and he's representing the Green Advisory Committee. So this was a hot topic. Everyone was gonna be like, oh, we're gonna be at all those meetings and we're gonna offer all this input. Just, it doesn't happen. So we hope that they'll look at it and watch it on their own to be part of the process, but we make it available.
Though, because like, remember, people, the public don't know what a library should really look like. So it's more like, when they see some, I know what I don't want it to look like.
Right.
So, yeah, it's tough for the public sometimes.
That's the mission of this group,
Yeah.
is to translate.
Yeah. And, you know, getting off topic a little, you know, when you look at the original, the edition from what, 1972 or something, I mean, there was a long process of like 30 years of architectural history that came to that design and why they were making things that way at this time. And you're not often gonna hear me say this, but, you know, I think, right, you know, architecture right now, where, you know, it kind of goes up and down, and I think it's at a pretty good place, to be honest with you, where, so I think you're probably gonna get a good product out of this personally. You know, so, you know, I think you're gonna get a good design building. Seems like it to me when I've seen built, you know, all the examples they put up here.
The work has become just generally much more contextualized. It's rooted in the context of a place. And I think at the time of the 72 edition, that was at the tail end of the brutalist era where everything was brick and concrete. And that was a very specific era of architecture time. And since then, it has evolved a lot more.
But, you know, there was some nice buildings and then they
Sure.
stood on their own.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know, and,
But then the nature of libraries have changed dramatically since the 70s as well. I mean, we
yeah.
often make the analogy that libraries were, you know, book warehouses. That was their sole purpose, was to house their collection, and the librarians that knew that collection. And it wasn't an outward facing institution. Now, just the role of libraries has changed so dramatically that the architecture is to reflect that.
Palaces for the people. So there.
Well, it's kind of funny, you look at the old libraries, the great big doors. And in some ways, you look at the very much smaller door of the new libraries. I mean, the edition, 72 edition, which they probably wanted to make it seem more like, a smaller door going into a house, but in some ways it's in the ground, doesn't, it's not as open.
Like a cave.
But, so.
But there was an intent to it.
If you guys don't mind,
Yeah, let's
we
move on.
can talk about the theory of architecture as I've already done it for 10 years now, but we can, we'd love to
So,
move into the
I just
interior
have a question. At
program.
this point, if we're switching over, does everyone have to stay or exterior design? I don't know.
So if exterior design folks want to leave, you can, but we should vote on the minutes then now, because the exterior committee will need to vote on the minutes as well.
Okay,
So if we can pause and take a vote on the minutes, and then whoever wants to vote from the first committee.
so
I was the director of development for the Concord Public Library for 10 years.
I thought I had the copies of the minutes.
No, I left Concord in December. I'm the director of development for the Advanced Math and Science Planning Charter School in Marlboro.
Yes, January 4th was just the 2.0 committee. The January 12th was the joint committee.
Okay, so
I make
I have
a
a motion to
yeah.
accept the minutes of the January 12th meeting, correct?
Yes,
First.
but we should make two motions, one for the 2.0 committee, take a vote, and then one for the exterior, because they are two separate legal committees. So if you want to do the 2.0,
I make a motion for the 2.0 committee to approve the meeting minutes from January 12th.
Second.
All in favor?
We have to ask if there's any amendments.
or any
Oh.
discussions,
Any discussion?
and I am going to unmute Sunny and Morgan, so
Do
they
you need to
can,
do a roll call because Morgan's online?
yes.
Morgan and Sunny, yeah.
Okay.
So if there's no discussion, we'll take a roll call vote. Morgan,
Yes.
me,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
it's everybody, yes? Or just, I'm
On
so
2.0.
confused. Is it just 2.0?
Just 2.0, yes, we have to vote them
Sorry.
separate.
Aisha,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Tina's a yes. Marcy?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you. Denise.
so that's unanimous.
Unanimous.
I make a motion for the exterior building committee to approve the meeting minutes from the January 12th.
Second,
Any discussion? Okay, so roll call vote.
so this one you don't need to roll call, you could just declare it unanimous if it is, because everyone is in person. on this
Okay,
committee.
everyone in favor? All right, thank you very much.
You have to declare it unanimous,
It's unanimous.
because there are people remote that can't see all the hands. Okay, so.
Okay.
I'm gonna go. You may.
Thank you so
go.
much.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks,
Thanks
Melissa.
for your input.
Want to just do the.
I do. I want to make another motion. And that
I need to
motion
practice, so you
for the
practice.
2.0 committee is to approve the meeting minutes from January 4th.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Any discussion? Roll call, Morgan,
a minute. Oh, this-
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Aisha,
Yes.
Tina's a yes.
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Marcy,
Yes,
Denise,
Yes.
Pat. Okay, so it's unanimous. I'll be good at this by 2024, don't worry about it. Thank you.
okay, back over to you.
Got it. So we're going to start just by looking at the original concept plans that we've showed you a few times now that we were originally pricing off of. And then we'll follow up with some comments from the staff, and then we'll look at the new concept programs or new concept
Oh, is that
plans.
one
There's a set here.
I just want to go forward. Well, so on screen are the original concept plans. These are kind of generally sized with what we anticipated coming out of the feasibility study. Following the staff interviews, we found that some of these things could change size a little bit. And what the biggest change probably is there's no longer a need for such a large reference room that we had originally scheduled in our plans. So you'll see that change in the plans coming up. But if you go to the next slides, please. This is some of the staff feedback that we got. It's organized by program, by space, so meeting room, staff space. We talked a lot about the teen space, of course, as well as the site. The children's will probably follow up with when we can talk to Chris. But some of the things generally did stay the same. The need for meeting rooms, small meeting rooms is extremely important. The audible separation between spaces is one of the biggest complaints and needs that we've heard. There's also an enormous amount of clubs that need to be separated and still need one large flexible space for up to 30 to 40 people for really a whole host of activities. We have a few things written down here, ghost trivia and cookbook club possibly. But you'll see later on how we can implement that with other programs as well.
Hey, I have a question.
Yep.
Are these all concurrent, or could you devise one space that you could then use as one large space and also divide it up the way when I was a kid, the gymnasium used to be, sliding wooden doors?
That was actually a question I asked them when we met.
Oh,
I worked at a library where they had a very, very large, big meeting room, and it had a retractable wall so that you could make it into two spaces as well. I'm not sure this, you'd know better, maybe this would be big enough to need to do that. I don't know, but it's something we've talked about.
Yeah, we could certainly explore it.
so
It is big enough, but it's also small enough to support smaller groups without feeling like a airplane hangar as well. So we're gonna try to kind of design it to support both sizes, but possibly without separating spaces. But we'll look at also separating them in case we want 5 small meeting rooms at one time.
I'm
Did you
confused.
talk at this level of detail when you met with them prior to the concept designs? And if yes, how much changed from those conversations?
We talked at a similar level of detail. I mean, I think this conversation was mostly, these are new plans, so these are different than what you see on screen. So we'll get to these.
Yeah, okay, I
So we
got
get
it.
to handing them out early. But so.
You did, though. You talked
We
to
did,
staff.
yeah, and we talked about how
Yeah.
spaces would be used and the number of spaces, and mostly what we heard a couple weeks ago was sort of reiterating what we had heard over a year and a half ago, but there was some like nuanced differences, mostly focused around the reference space, which we'll talk more about, how teens use the library, and how we may think about that a little bit differently. But in terms of like what types of spaces that we need and how many of them and for what, what quantity of people, that was it's mostly in line with where we were.
Yeah, it was like the collections is staying the same size. The reading areas generally sized correctly. So a few things changed with the staff spaces, or we understand the staff spaces a bit more, processing, understand the requirements and the requests a bit more with that. So if you look at your plans now.
Yeah, Denise, you can click forward, Denise. It'll be on screen too, but we've looked at 2 options that Andrew will talk you through. And they are largely similar in terms of just where the primary program spaces are to where we were in concept design, but you'll start to see they've already begun to get more detailed. And there'll be some nuance that we'll talk you through. But one of the driving factors is why I was hinting at it before when we were looking at that existing photo of where the two lower levels are. Because we're proposing to lower the level of the new addition, that then means we need to make up that difference somehow by either a ramp or a sloped walk or an elevator. So the way, and that adding the ramp, including a ramp, because we're gonna have at least a 2-foot height difference is what we're thinking. Could actually be a little bit more, it could be closer to 30 inches. That requires a lot of ramp. That's 24, 30 feet of ramp. Good question.
Yeah, I do, because I realize I'm confused. This shape, is this the old original building only? Is this,
So there's a turret. This
Yeah.
is both. So this is the original building here with the addition.
that's the
to right.
existing one, right?
No,
This is the existing addition, not,
No, that's a proposed new.
oh,
addition.
I see, got it.
Yeah, so the line of the existing original building is it's about there. So that's all proposed new. So that's okay. Yeah, we'll get there. It's a lot to absorb. So just thinking about that,
So, sorry, the ramp space that you're talking about would be here?
so there would be some exterior ramp to get us up from sidewalk grade to the lower addition. Right now, there's about that 4.5 feet. So we're proposing to bring that down, so it's only about 2 feet
Okay.
from the sidewalk-ish. I mean, this is all ish because we're kind of dialing it in, but then that would mean that there's a 2-foot, if not a 2.5-foot difference between the new addition lower level and the existing lower level of the original.
But like
historical.
inside the first.
Right,
level,
okay,
is
I get-
basically what he's
I get
talking about.
We
So
want-
the new entrance, the arched entrance, will that be accessible or no? Only getting in from,
We are proposing to make that accessible. Yes.
both will be accessible.
Yes, that is the goal. That is absolutely the goal. Yep.
But the back where there's currently a ramp, that will no longer exist. Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
That won't even be, I mean, that'll be a door, like an exit only door,
No, I don't
right?
think
I don't think.
It might not even be a
I don't
door
think we
anymore.
need it once this
It's still in
becomes,
the way.
this
So the
becomes an
door
active
disappears.
entrance.
Okay. Got it. New.
So sorry, what
Got
Tina
it.
was saying
That's
about
what
the
you're saying,
ramping
so it needs to be
inside.
somewhere.
So that change in elevation that I'm talking about is what's driving these two schemes, because we're looking at one scheme that doesn't have an interior ramp,
Okay,
but has that has an elevator.
Yeah.
That makes up that difference.
so it would be like a half level elevator.
Yeah,
kind of
not
thing.
even
It's
like
like a
a,
2-foot
yes.
elevator, but yes, like you had an L and then a 1 and a 2, but basically
Correct.
inside.
yeah.
The
So,
interior, is the interior ramp showing on here and I'm missing it, or is it just?
yeah, so why don't, Andrew, how do you
Start
want,
with the ramp.
yeah, let's,
Seems like is the, if you want to go to the next slide.
So one of your things on top here
Yeah,
will say ramp
I
plus
see that.
elevator.
I see that,
so, yeah, so.
got that far.
I can-
So you
I can
see
zoom
inside
in.
on the
Is it in
first
here
floor in gray.
yeah,
Do you
so-
want to
on
walk
the
up and
first-
just point
Yeah,
on
I'll-
the screen? Are
let's
you
do it
allowed
on
to
the
do that?
screen, Andrew, and you
Is
guys
that
can
gonna
follow
screw
along.
everybody
Yeah.
up, like
Thank
this remote?
Well, I think you'd have to verbally describe it as well for our
Yeah, Marcy.
remote
can you show
folks.
Oh, of course, I will do my best to describe this well.
And it is a
Thank
touchy
you.
screen.
This is-
we'll talk about it.
Would you mind going to
Yes,
the,
whoops. Let's just-
That's the main entrance.
showing over towards
The original one is up here on level 2.
This is the one I was at.
Lower level entrance will be
so
to the
one
addition.
down.
I was trying to make it bigger for you, but.
So you'll
We all look
see,
this way?
you'll see here, this is the lower level, which right now, this is the basement of the historical building, right? And then we have our new addition, which we're calling it at +0, if you see on your sheets. And then +2 is the basement of the historical building. So we need to create circulation between those two levels, vertical circulation. So in this scheme, we've wrapped the ramp around the back of the workroom and the circulation desk. It pushes it aside. In our original concept plan, we actually had that ramp front and center, but we've decided that we'd rather have use and access just through the staircase there. And then you can easily wrap up or wrap just into the rest of the collections area. And that circulates around the circulation desk and creates clean lines kind of between the whole building.
Couple other program differences. In the concept scheme, we had the teen lounge up on the upper level.
Yeah, why did you switch that to the basement?
So there's a couple thoughts there. We didn't realize after conversations with library staff that we didn't think we needed as large of a space, because based on the young adult use, it's typically like after school, 3 to 5 p.m.
Yep.
So there's some thinking that we don't need to build out a space specifically to teen use for that small window. You know, if there was a large group of young adults, they could use the flexible meeting space in that time frame. But then if they wanted to break away and have smaller study sessions, we could still support that through a smaller teen lounge type space. So that's what we're showing in the orange. And we're proposing it here in this scheme anyway, to kind of keep it further from children space and the quiet historic reading spaces up here. So if there is a sort of loud group of young adults, they wouldn't be near those quiet spaces.
Yeah, Kat, we realized after that we had like reference quiet reading in teens. And no matter what we do in
Yeah.
closing that space, it's gonna be loud. So staff
Right.
was like, it might make more sense if we have space in the first floor to do it, because it's really such a condensed time frame that they're in there.
Right.
It also creates some, a bit of oversight for them if they want to go between the flexible meeting space and what we're calling the lounge. They have to pass by the circulation desk and the office. So there will be some oversight or security, if you want to call it that.
Right.
I also think that, I mean, the whole idea when we're in this, when it's completely done, is nothing's gonna feel like a basement. It's just gonna be a 2-level building. One is lower than the other level, but we won't ever call it a basement, because that's not really how we want people to wrap their minds around what we're
Right.
giving them.
But I think like my sense, like just from my personal sense, I still have a feeling that this quote unquote teen lounge area or the small meeting area in these front rooms are not gonna have like, maybe they'd have like an upper riser window, but I don't think there's gonna be any like light in this area of that. It's not like it's in the new part, like certainly the
will though.
flexible meeting space will have.
But
like,
won't it
light.
though? Because you're taking away that, you're opening up the turret and all of that, so won't there be windows there?
I don't think they're now, because
No,
that's below,
probably not.
that's below the original one. So yes, that is a sort of landlocked
Yeah, so
space
like
in the
right
sense that there's no natural light, direct natural light anyway. But I think that, you know, there's lots of opportunity to still make that a very welcoming and enjoyable space to be in.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality too, and this is just my perspective, having 3 teens, they like to be outside, frankly. Like they come to the library, they go inside, they drop their bags, and then they go outside a lot. I mean, maybe when it's freezing cold and raining, they don't, but like they play on the roof deck and they play,
know.
like they sit on the
But
picnic
that's not
tables and
gonna, so that's what I'm wondering, like, I feel like wherever the teen area should be somewhat interconnected to whatever's happening outside.
I mean, the
And I don't
issue with
think
a teen
having it-
area from a library perspective generally is it's a self-identifying space, and older teens would never self-identify themselves into a space
Right.
where a 10-year-old that wants to be a teen would be.
Right.
So it's a pretty hard space, 1, to define, and 2,
Right.
to figure out how to program. And we currently don't actually have a dedicated teen librarian, right? And so like, that's a whole
Well,
different
that was my
conversation.
whole thing too,
So
right?
in some ways, that just literally might be a backpack drop off. It might just be a backpack drop off.
I guess what I'm saying is like, I see Chris as a teen and children's librarian, right? So if she's upstairs, like before, what I liked about the design was that the teens and the children were next door to one another, so that when there was programming that could overlap, like I think a lot of times there's programming that Chris runs that is appealing to the preteen set, but they can't access it because they're not gonna go upstairs, you know, and be with her because they're gonna be wherever their arcade games are. But I feel like if the gaming or whatever's happening is nearer to what programming is happening in the library, I think should get more participation in that. But that's just my perspective. But
Yeah, no, I
also agree
totally
with
hear
you.
that. I just also think, like, for my kids to go in, they would never go where the 3-year-olds were having a program. They don't want to be part of that. Like they might go say they're cute and then they'd walk away as fast as they could. They like the separation.
Right. But I guess,
That's really interesting. We'll have to ask
I know,
Chris
you guys
about
are like
that.
asking us about.
The
grants
programming.
We're talking.
Is Chris the YA librarian?
Well, see, she does it all.
She's like the default one
But we
now,
don't have we don't have a teen librarian. So ideally, if we could in the future have like a part-time teen librarian who was there when they were there.
Right,
that
from
would be
noon
the-
to
That
3
would
or
be the
whatever.
goal.
Right.
But you bring up a good point, Kat, because you do almost want them, I didn't think about this when we talked about it, to have access to the outside easily.
Like even if you were gonna switch, like, because the teen lounge here is 117, the teen lounge, the break room on the top floor is 148. So even if you did that switch and you just literally switched those two things,
Which
that
is-
could do it easier. But I don't know where the doors are gonna be for the outside either. Like,
So
I don't
it's
know what
actually-
you're,
Our plan or concepts to kind of integrate them into the flexible meeting space at certain hours the flexible meeting space will either be very close to the new front entrance in the addition or
Yeah.
have its own entrance, depending on how some security things work.
Yeah.
But they will be very close to the exterior if we allow them to use the flexible meeting space.
gotcha.
So I think, yeah, that's a good thing to think about. And Marcy, you made a good point too, because like the teen use, it's mostly middle schoolers.
Correct.
Like it's
That's right.
very clear that
It's
there's.
10 to 13.
It's 10 to 13 year
It's not
olds.
high schoolers. They're at a they're not.
They're cool. They don't go to the library.
Yeah, for all of the reasons, they're not in the library.
Yeah,
But that's one of the reasons, and thanks for bringing up the outdoor connection, because when we were talking about the flexible meeting room, it's like, yeah, that could be their space to play in a video game tournament or do whatever it is that they want to do from that 3 to 5 window. They have direct connection to outdoors, and that could be their space for kind of like gathering together and being a group. But if there were, those middle schoolers who want a study space or to be more individual work, they could still have a space that they identify as their own in this lounge.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was kind of the thinking. But we should talk about with Chris about the programming component about it, because she wasn't there and that just wasn't part of the dialogue that we had.
Yeah.
But,
Hi, this is Morgan. I just want to ask a question. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought when we were talking about some of the smaller meeting spaces that were going to be like private or quiet or something, that those could also double essentially as like study rooms, so that if there was someone, whatever age, that actually wanted to come and work on a project or something, not just hang out after school, there would be space that they could go do that in. Is that incorrect?
that's 100% correct. I mean,
Okay. Okay, good.
the 3 small meeting rooms, sorry, I don't know if you can see me, but on up here are, still very conceptual in their size, but we want to create a handful of rooms, ideally 3, that are of different size for, maybe just 2 or 3 people together to maybe up to 6. And those could be used for
Okay.
any type of group or function.
Denise?
Yeah, okay, great.
So I have a question, since you provided 2 options. Can we discuss the 2 options? Because I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of the elevator only
Me
and having people take an elevator 2 feet. I quite frankly would like to rule this out as an option if the rest of the committee agrees. We're doing all this renovation. I don't want to end up in a situation that it's not an easy flow from the entrance to the collection and people have to take an elevator. I think that defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do with this. So I don't know how everyone else feels.
I mean, you do lose a ton of square footage of the library by making a ramp, right?
There is a staircase between as well.
So there's a stair.
I know, but it's not
Accessible.
accessible, and I feel like having to take an elevator for a 2-foot change in
Mhm.
grade is, I think I think we'll get criticism that we're doing all of this and people have to take an elevator for 2 feet.
Well,
We
right
couldn't have
now,
found a better
I mean, so
option.
is there gonna be any door on this side? Not really, right?
With-
This will all be closed off.
Right.
Like the only door on the first level is gonna be over where it
From
is.
the exterior?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So
Um,
Richard, this is the 2.0 section for right now. If we can just discuss amongst the 2.0 committee, And then we can get back to you, but I think as a 2.0 committee, we need to have this conversation for a little bit.
Okay, while she's
Yeah.
thinking, I'm going to ask, is there a reason why instead of steps here, this can't be the ramp? Why can this be just a graded transition?
In an ideal world, yes, but you need 24 feet to do
Oh,
that.
oh,
So
I
that's-
see.
That's,
Okay.
that's the issue. It's just the length of ramp we need to make up the difference.
Got it.
It takes up a lot of floor space, but
Mhm.
completely hear you, Denise, and like the library should feel accessible, to everybody. So it's an important conversation to be having, and
And what is this span? Just, I mean, just for general
that's
sense.
roughly 6 feet.
Oh,
6,
okay,
7
got it.
feet. So yeah, I mean, this is the length of the ramp that you would need to get this.
Got it, I see,
So like,
okay.
we would have to switch back, and
Yeah.
we can totally do it, and we'll explore it, and we'll figure it out in a really sensitive, good way.
In your experience, when ramps are the furthest away option, do people still use them? Or are we gonna end up with people like trying to haul strollers upstairs and damaging them?
I think if ramps are visible to people, they'll use them, yeah.
Yeah, the stairs and ramp are on either side of the circulation desk, so they're sort of equally prominent, and they arrive roughly the same place.
That was
So
the
it's about-
intent.
But if you see stairs here and you have to know to go behind the circulation desk.
But if you have a stroller,
If I had a
you're
stroller,
probably,
I would
I'm looking for the ramp.
I would pull the stairs.
If you
One
have
of the
a-
stairs. I would-
Yeah, if have a stroller, you're either going to this, you're getting in the elevator to get to the second
To the
floor,
top.
because that's where the children's is, or you're going into the second floor. Like, that's what I
New
think, like,
entrance.
right, like if I had a stroller with
Definitely
me,
want to-
I would walk either into an elevator. Because you're already gonna have to go into an elevator to get to the second floor. You're already gonna have to do
Right.
that.
Yeah.
So in my mind, this isn't really saving too much in terms of like that, right? Like you're already gonna have to get into an elevator. You can't take a ramp up to the second floor. So in
Except
my
outside,
mind,
yeah.
And you have to think of wheelchairs, not just strollers.
right, so in my mind though, if you're a wheelchair bound person and you have to already take an elevator to get to the second floor, to me, getting in an elevator to get to the first floor isn't that big of a deal. We have we go every week to a dance studio that has like exactly this situation, and everybody just nobody takes the stairs, and it's 3 stairs or 4 stairs, every single person just hits the button. Because they're like, well, I'm already going up, so I'll just, I mean, that's how I feel, like, I don't know, it's like, it is a weird thing, because it's like this weird half-level situation, but I think most people, I mean, I don't know, that's just my perspective, but that's just, again, to save on the square footage of a huge ramp.
If this is gonna be the entrance, this flexible meeting space, why couldn't the ramp start here?
Well, we're imagining 2 entrances. I'll point to the screen so everybody
Okay.
can see. The thought is that it just diagrammatically where these arrows are represented, that this would be the primary new entrance here.
Under the stairs, so those stairs would be going up over it?
Yeah, or near the stairs. I mean,
Got it.
let's, gotta be careful not to be too literal, because it's
Okay,
a word, but
yeah.
yes, you would walk into like a double height space.
I
You
see,
would see
okay.
a stair up to the upper level, the elevator would be right nearby, and this would sort of be a new kind of lobby browsing space with circulation desk visible, the ramp visible, the meeting rooms. This is intended to be, and we talked about this too, so I'm glad you brought this up. At the time of concept design, we were thinking about if this needs to operate independently of the library hours in the evening or whatever, there could be a dedicated entrance into
Got it.
that
Okay.
meeting room. But then we were also talking with the staff, so it's a good inquiry, is, if there was an after hours need to use this space, couldn't folks still come in this way? Somehow we separate, there's a separation here, so people can't get into the rest of the library. People can still get into the lobby, get access to the restrooms, because they would need those for, and maybe you don't need that direct entrance into the meeting.
So to Lisa's point, where that purple arrow is, you can't start a ramp there and then bend it where you have that 2 foot.
It's not enough, but we can look at it. I mean, just for comparison, it wouldn't be that much different than the footprint of the Orange Team Lounge, the amount of ramp and landing we would need to get up to that level. That's kind of the norm. It's
That's
a lot.
200 square feet.
Yeah, It's probably closer to like 150. It's probably like 10 feet by 12. So 120, 150 square feet, but it's the size of a room. It's the size of a good sized room.
Right.
So if you provide an elevator, oh, I see. You couldn't get to the reflection. Never mind.
This is kind of exactly the conversation that
Yeah.
why we developed these two options is the ramp. And that specific type of accessibility, an extreme need for this library, or does the elevator solve that 3-stop elevator rather than a 2-stop elevator?
But you
Solve
also
that
always will
accessibility.
have, so the accessibility is solved in 2 ways, though. It's solved in an outdoor ramp to get you all the way from.
A
street
very
level.
long outdoor
Right,
ramp.
so to get you from street level to exterior 2nd floor is solved by an exterior ramp. Or you're going into the building and taking an elevator, is that correct? Like there's 2 ways for a handicap or stroller to get upstairs.
To get to the second
To
floor,
get to the 2nd
yes.
floor exterior, and then to get to the 1st floor, the only way to get onto the, I guess what we're calling that, I'll just call that original 1st floor. You must take an elevator or you have to build this 20-foot, 24-foot ramp.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a-
Does Design Lab have a recommendation on this, or are you completely neutral on the 2 options?
Good question. It's a really hard question. So I don't think, no, we have a recommendation at this point. I think getting a read of the room and hearing some of this feedback is critical because it is a matter of accessibility and inclusivity and making everybody feel welcome into this library, which is paramount, right? But at the same time, for us, we know on the other side of the conversation, we know we're operating with a pretty tight budget. And we're trying to find efficiencies in the layout and use of space as best as we can.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weighing those against one another. And I'll be candid, at the concept design phase, we knew we were contemplating this change in elevation, but like we hadn't started to figure out the technical requirements of getting a ramp in there, what that would mean and how much space it would need and what it would do to the layouts that we had developed. So it just may mean that this addition needs to grow a little bit to make all this stuff work.
Yeah, there's kind of 3 things I think that Judy's just said, like definitely wants to be a welcoming space and because it sends a message, it's the most public building in town. The size is at least 2 meeting rooms. Right, it's gonna be like 150 square feet of space. You make it bigger or whatever. I mean, it's a simple trade-off as that. But then the 3rd one is, what are we connecting? Because this space that we're connecting to is not the children's space. It's not the main meeting room, it's the collections.
That's right.
So it's actually maybe not the most trafficked, or at least trafficked at one time space.
Well, but
There's not a
maybe
big
for,
crowd.
maybe for elderly and not for people with children, but
Yeah.
for older people who go in there to look for books.
Yeah.
It could be critical to have easy access to that area.
Yeah, so the question is just that, is who's using this?
Yeah.
And.
I mean, it depends on what the use of that space is, I guess, is what it comes down to.
It looks like it's stacks.
Yeah, it's predominantly the collection in stack form. Yep.
I'm just curious if we're gonna hear from people. So like, can you point on that parking area, what one will be the accessible parking spot?
Yeah, I mean, this is the concept design landscape plan. So next time we're all together, our landscape architects will be with us with updated plans. But the 2 closest to the building are intended to be.
So can you estimate for me what the distance from both ways somebody with a walker or a wheelchair would get in?
Well, didn't we also talk about if it does become
One
one
way,
way, wouldn't there be handicap parking directly across from the
Yes, we talked
entrance?
about that too. So that's a wild card.
So,
If
or
we-
even maybe a spot up top where, I don't know, maybe that's gone now. Because there's a current spot
Top where?
up on Crescent Street,
Like
but that might be gone with the landscape design, I don't know.
The spot that's where the current ramp
Where
is,
the
under the
current
ramp
ramp
is, right?
Yeah, but that would still be a long way around for someone who's in a wheelchair and needs accessibility.
I just,
To park there, go around the corner.
this is totally me having a experience in another library, but we were not approved by the Disability Commission in Concord because they felt like our particular 2 spots that we had dug out, like not just a curb cut, but like whole space in, because they had to open their door to the traffic, they felt like they were totally unsafe and we did not get like the buy-in. I'm just wondering if we're gonna hear from somebody in the disability community that thinks those distances are too far for somebody in a wheelchair, because they look far to me.
Right, but they don't have to take the ramp to the second floor. They can go in the main entrance and take the elevator to go up.
But the
It's-
main,
it's Probably, that's probably 60 to 75 feet.
and
No,
how
but
is
the
it?
First, the flex, to go into the flexible meeting space.
Oh, if that's a public entrance, then 30 feet.
Oh, I thought we were saying that that was only gonna be a nighttime entrance. You're thinking that's gonna be a regular, so there'd be 2 entrances on the ground floor and a 3rd entrance on the,
We're thinking that this direct entrance, I mean, this is all up for conversation, so it's kind of the point of all of this, that this will evolve. We may not need this. It depends on how this space is configured and how the rest of the library can be secured for evening use. It could be both and.
but like,
I don't see this is not intended to be like a day-to-day user coming to use a library would be used this entrance.
especially if
This would be to
somebody's
support-
using the space,
this would
right?
be
Like
to
that would be
support
weird.
specific-
I think the parking has always been an issue, and that's a big reason why we couldn't even go for funding with the state. So I think we're doing the best that we can with what we have. I don't know how to make it any closer.
It's not a criticism from me, it's just that we don't want public criticism from the disability community. That's not a
Yeah.
community we want. We can really handle criticism from, because you can't combat that kind of criticism, right? Or you sound like you don't care.
And that's my concern with the elevator for 2 feet. And I know it's commonplace and all, but if we're doing this renovation to still make somebody who needs accessibility to the collection have to take an elevator to go 2 feet, I think is still gonna be a criticism.
I think we should solicit feedback from this, because I don't even know. Like, I don't even know. Yeah, I don't know. Do you think?
Well, what is the library experience? Let's ask the librarian.
Or
I
can
mean,
Frank
we-
is our ADA coordinator. so
There you go.
So the thing about the elevator versus ramp, I think, I forgot your name already, I'm sorry.
Andrew.
Andrew. Everybody has different needs. It's not like there's one disabled person, that's the poster person, that gives you the needs that you need. Somebody mentioned walkers. People with those would probably I can't speak for everybody. I've helped people with those. They'd rather go in an elevator than down a ramp, walking down one of those things.
Especially in the winter.
Some people might prefer a ramp. People with neuropathy prefer stairs. They don't want to walk down a ramp. There's so many different things, and if you talk to the state architectural access board, they're kind of, how do we serve the most people? How do we get the most accessibility into things? So sometimes an elevator going 3 feet can serve more people than a ramp. Sometimes a ramp is but it's not like a cut and dry, what's the use? But then if you do an elevator, you want to make it inviting to use, you make it all glass, how do you make it look like, it can't be just a little small box either, because you gotta be able to get,
Strollers, a stretcher, yeah.
well, not necessarily a stretcher, but a good sized wheelchair with a person. What do they call those little tiny elevators?
Service elevator?
Like the
No.
lift.
It's a lift.
Like what we
Yeah,
currently have?
they allow the
Yeah.
ones that go up 3 stories that are, they don't call them elevators. and that's just like something else. I can't think of the
How
word now,
many stairs are gonna be there?
but, so it's not always as simple as, one is more accessible than another.
Between the 2 lower levels, 4 to 6 steps.
6 steps.
So, and some people, okay, so if we have a ramp, we want the elevator, then a person on crutches or whatever they happen to be using, it has to go an extra 24 feet.
Exactly.
So, not that but might serve more people.
Right.
Too. And I think as far as the parking, Tina mentioned, we haven't totally figured out all the outside landscaping anyway, and they make the street one way, they could probably get parking closer to the door. And have that work out too, so. It's a good point, though. You don't want to have to walk too far from the parking spaces, because
I mean, especially in the winter and all that other stuff, I just think that it's
well, we do a good job clearing the sidewalks.
Say, look at what we make them do right
I don't have sidewalks at the library.
You will.
A very long ramp at the library. So Tina,
So
you
what
have,
do we-
Arnie has his hand up, but it's your call if you want to solicit public comment at this point.
I don't, not right now. Thank you though, Arnie. I'm just trying to keep this going. So what are our next steps here? Do we take this and think about it and,
Well, I would love to hear your opinion on, are there people that you feel are in the town, they basically can't use the library right now? Are there,
No.
it's a large group? No.
no, I see elderly people, people of all ages with canes, wheelchairs, strollers, and I have not had anyone use the lift to go to the second floor, except a child on the spectrum that like to ride in it. Every parent that has a stroller takes their child out and carries them up the stairs. Adults that have had challenges have not needed to go up the stairs because the collection's on the first floor. I take that back. When I did have a couple of larger like author events, they did use the lift if they had challenges walking. I don't know if that helps you.
It's a lot to digest. And there's a lot of differing opinions, and so it's actually really interesting.
I have a question that's not related to this, and it's about the meeting rooms, the 3 meeting rooms that are like tucked in the corner there. Could those have the retractable walls between those 2 so that they could be?
Mhm.
Yes.
Somerville has that, right?
Yeah, we did that
Yeah.
between, like, we turned like a 4 to 5 people meeting room into like an 8 to 10 by a small retractable wall.
Can you still hear through the wall though when it's closed?
A little bit.
There's more noise transmission, but it's still, it's like muffled. You can't perceive what somebody's speaking unless they're, yelling, but you'd be able to hear that through a wall anyway. But they're quite well constructed now, where you don't have the noise bleed.
And it's an upgrade to anything that's currently there because there are no divided rooms, right? Like when we meet as the library trustees, we meet in the open space. So not that that's privacy anyway, because they're open meetings. I'm just saying, nobody's accustomed to even having walls for meetings in the library.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go back to one of my concerns with the elevator and the ramp is the restrooms. The restrooms are all on both models in the entranceway section. So if someone's in the collection and needs to go to the restroom, again, they have to deal with some type of transition of either an elevator or a ramp to get to the
Mhm.
facilities.
Yeah.
That's-
You're absolutely right, and there's a number of reasons why we're locating the restrooms in that portion of in the new portion of the buildings, because we can plumb below the slab and do all of that stuff, and then those restrooms can also serve the meeting room after hours. So, we could explore including a restroom elsewhere on that lower level, but it's not required by code.
I mean, it makes sense that they're here for the exterior accessibility, but I do have that concern that there is that transition of some sort to get there.
To go from here to here.
Yes.
All the more reason to have a couple of ways to get there in my mind.
Yeah, no, I'm headed there too, John. Like, I feel like it would be remiss, and we don't have to walk away from this meeting with a decision, but based on the initial reaction, and there are different opinions, as there always will be, it seems like it's prudent to include a ramp, to figure out how to make it work creatively, which we're totally up for that challenge, and potentially even consider an elevator that has to stop too. Because to Frank's point, you never know what some individuals' needs are and what they're comfortable with and what they're not. So we'll continue to look at it.
You're saying you're gonna try to do both?
Eventually.
Are
Yeah.
there,
I mean, I knew, we knew it was gonna be touchy, but wanted to have a conversation, and I think the reaction that we've got is that there's different opinions, of course, but to be inclusive to everybody and everyone's individual needs, which we can never all predict, it seems like having a ramp option, a stair option, and potentially an elevator option is the way to do it.
Especially for a library, something that's open to all, it just seems like the best.
And
possible
especially because this
solution.
is the big project we're gonna have and not another one for quite a few more
You don't want
years.
to be talking about the elevator for 9 months.
Yeah, and everybody's gonna come to see it in the first year or two, and
Point of interest.
if there's something that they don't like
Make it feel
that
less.
makes them inaccessible, it's gonna be.
Are there ways to utilize maybe the wall space around the ramp to add in some more storage?
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll
Way.
display something on those walls.
Just to pick up
Oh,
some more of
for
the square
sure.
footage, not, I
Yeah.
mean, not just art, but like more of the smaller library of things items or DVDs.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
I don't know if you're gonna be allowed to put anything on the ramp, but it's just gonna have to keep that like
Yeah, have
empty.
clearance.
But if it's like recessed into
Yeah,
the
you could do
wall.
that.
Yeah, in Concord, it's an art gallery, the ramp
Yeah,
is.
that's what I figured.
I hear there's a wedding dress to be displayed.
Oh, my God. I don't think that was accepted.
Yeah, you don't know.
Yeah.
All right,
we'll-
we're going on 2 hours here.
Oh, we are?
So we probably want to keep going. Do we want to have more discussion on this or?
Well, no, I think in the interest of time, we should shift gears, but I do encourage everybody to think about this and share thoughts and, take a week, few days and share any feedback with us. And we're happy to incorporate it into the next round. But I don't think we're walking away tonight, nor do we expect to, with direction to do one or the other. I think that
Are you able to do another option that incorporates both and see
Yeah.
how you could reconfigure that sort of workroom?
Yep.
Yeah.
Space, because I
Yeah.
think that's really what would be at play. The workroom and the elevator and the circ desk sort of needing to flip flop if there's a ramp.
Absolutely, and I'm gonna sound like a broken record, I said this at the kickoff, I'll say it again now, and this is an iterative process, this is why we're doing this, we're hearing feedback from you, we're gonna take that feedback, we'll come up with an updated scheme, and we'll see how that one is. So yeah, let's shift gears and talk quickly on the fire protection.
Yeah, it sounds like it's gonna be a different conversation than we intended, so.
So I don't know if
this
you
might
want
be
to talk about
separate.
that offline, because
I think we might want to talk about it.
we need to figure out on our side where the cisterns will be going and then, so I can connect with the fire chief. Or I can connect you with the fire chief and then we can have that.
The photos, just so we can go to the slide with, oh, sorry, Denise is driving, click forward a couple more, Denise, there's not this one. This is a technical challenge, so we're kind of shifting gears here from library programming and arrangement of spaces and all that fun stuff to one of the larger technical challenges that we're going to encounter on this project, and that is to provide adequate water and water pressure to support a sprinkler system in the new library, which is a code requirement. Right now, there's just not enough pressure and not enough water available through the well that is currently serving the library. So there's conversations going on with Denise and others in the town about where we're going to locate essentially underground tanks. They're called cisterns that will have water in them available in the event of a fire. So we were aware of this at concept design, and we had costs included in our estimate for these, but it's kind of a bigger conversation that's more town-wide because there's an opportunity for these to serve more than just the library. So
Like the Shaw's Plaza?
No.
don't get all these inside jokes.
No, so we secured funding through Kate Hogan to install 6 cisterns throughout actually, she's trying to get us 13 in total, but 6 cisterns throughout the town for our fire suppression services, and one of them will be in the center. But there's been discussion internally about, is it on this complex, is it in the actual center, or is it at Town Center Park? Because it would have to be a larger cistern to accommodate fire suppression, should there need to be a response in this area. So if there's a way to tie this into what we're already installing, then that would be some cost savings. But I don't know that the fire department has identified their ideal location yet, but I will connect with them. I just found out about this from Tina just before the meeting, so I will connect with them. And I can even connect the fire chief with you all. Actually, I think it's the captain that's running the program. And we can have some conversations about that.
Yeah, we would,
That'd be
we would
great.
love to, because this was a big conversation that we wanted to have, and we actually had a bunch of options, and then we were gonna say, great idea is to have a whole town system. But we weren't sure whether that was gonna go at all, so it's amazing to hear that that's an option is there.
Yes.
Choice gets.
Well, having one or two like massive fires in town with no water helps our cause a bit, so.
I do believe that's all that we had. If you guys have any additional feedback on top of all the discussions that we've had, that'd be wonderful. If you have comments that you come up with over the next week, and if you send them to Tina will send them to us, and we will implement them, review everything. We'll come back to you in roughly 3 weeks with new plans, massage plans, massage diagrams, exterior ideas, so on and so forth.
So our next meeting is March 8th, that's that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and we are, let's see, yeah, our landscape collaborators will be here. So we'll have a similar kind of high-level conversation about the concept design landscape, and they'll have some updated ideas to share.
So we also wanted to discuss the timing of the meetings and are we separating them? Are we going to do like a 6:30 exterior design and then like a 7 building 2.0 thought?
Or are folks able to get here for a 6 o'clock
Oh, yeah.
meeting?
I mean, we're
Because I
open.
know, I think there was some
7 is
confusion
late.
that you all thought tonight was
Yeah,
at 6.
yeah.
So.
Oh, person 6?
No, we
No,
sorted,
no.
we sorted it.
Oh, okay, that's
Sorted it out,
good.
yeah.
They sent an email
I was like,
yesterday and
oh my
Tina and I were like, wait a minute, what time do we post the meeting for?
It's too late already.
No, it's fine. I mean, we're.
Is 6
we're
to 6
flexible.
o'clock work for people?
Are you talking about the exterior committee or the full building committee or both?
Well, it would seem if we did exterior first, then those folks could go if they wanted to, so.
And if we actually, do we have dedicated, I mean, I know we did tonight too, but do we have dedicated just exterior stuff to go over?
We will.
We will, yeah.
Good,
Yeah,
and then
it
if
was-
anyone wanted to come for the earlier meeting,
And that one's a half an hour?
We don't know, it's could vary, I don't know.
I mean, if
I
we-
don't, 6 o'clock's gonna be tough. I think 6:30 is like a little bit easier. So people can
Okay,
feed their-
so do we want to set the exterior design committee meeting at 6:30 for March 8th?
Sure, and then do the building committee
do
at
you want to
7:30?
follow up with Melissa?
Yeah,
We
I'll email
forgot
her.
before she left.
Yep. Okay.
Schedule 7 o'clock for the 2.0. And then if folks want to come earlier, you could sit in the audience but not participate unless we post a meeting. So if folks want to participate, we have to figure that out ahead of time. It's 2.0 versus the exterior.
And if you wouldn't mind sending us the agenda as well for the next meeting, so that we can just align.
Yes, well, I think if you can send us,
Yeah.
then we can put the agenda together.
Yeah, because I think they've just taken it from.
Oh, you took it from the.
Yeah, so-
Okay, so if that's,
But we can refine it, I think, if we need to, right?
Okay.
Is it possible to have someone send around the presentation deck just via email? I apologize for not being able to be there tonight, but I wasn't able to really look closely at it. So I'd love to be able to take a look if that's okay.
Also get her copies.
I have it on the
Yeah.
computer, Morgan, so I can email it out to
Okay.
you.
Awesome. Thank you. No rush, just so that I'm just interested.
I can send it to you right now while we're finishing up.
But this will be
You
like
still
a
have the
presentation on the
agenda,
website, right?
Is this okay to make public?
Or-
All of, I mean, like, because you have
We might
more
want to
stuff on.
amend the
Let's
sister
take-
section.
Yeah, I may
Okay.
take this section out since it's not relevant, but we can do that and send it to you tomorrow, and then you guys can post it. I mean,
Okay.
It's fine by us.
I just like having it because then I can look back and go, oh, I remember they showed a photo or
Yes.
something, and then I can look.
For
back.
sure.
Or when she has her dinner party, she can
Yeah,
throw it.
for sure.
What do you guys
Show
think of a
everyone.
ramp versus not a ramp?
With her red laser pointer.
That's
One for
right.
ramp,
That's
two
right.
for-
Where do you want your teens housed?
So John's been waiting patiently. Let's move
Oh,
on to
yes.
Colliers
Uh,
update.
I thought we were done.
Yes.
Oh, I thought you were done too. I was about to motion to.
If I could get a copy of that emailed to me too, I'd appreciate it because on Zoom, I can barely read everything. So that'd be great. Thank you. Also, I did notice on the proposal for upcoming meeting dates, it says April 13th, Wednesday, but April 13th is actually a Thursday. So I wanted to know if that was just like if you were thinking the 12th or the 13th.
So in the chart above, I don't see the new one. Was the chart above fixed? No.
The schematic has
Yeah,
been
it says
fixed,
Wednesday.
but for
Yeah.
design development.
So those dates are still on. Should be Wednesday 3/8 and Wednesday 4/12.
And so the potential tours of other libraries would happen between workshop 2 and workshop 3.
Yes.
That was a thought, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so they happen kind of in, as a SD cost estimate is going on, I think is what our thought process was. Right?
Okay. John.
Yeah, thank you. So my update's gonna be brief. It's not gonna be as interesting as what we've talked about already tonight, but just letting the committee know that part of what the OPM Colliers is doing is tracking the budget versus the actual expenditures. So, we do have a budget block that we've started. Not a lot to report in terms of expenditures, with the exception of Colliers invoice, which you'll see in your packet for this evening. I think that was the amount of, what was it, about $8,000?
That Tina has them on.
I
now.
have them, right?
Yeah, and just so you know, that encompasses that fee, the planning phase that started last year, I think, with helping with the contracting with the designer. And that closes out the planning phase. It's a few hours for the design phase, which would be the time from the meeting that I spent traveling to and from, et cetera. So, but anyway, so we'll continue to give you a quick, as we continue meeting and as the process goes on, we'll give you updates on the expenditures versus the budget. And that budget that we're tracking is $8.85 million, right? That's what was appropriated. And that's the total project budget. That's soft cost plus construction costs. Construction costs are estimated, or were estimated, at $6.55 million, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to be interested to see where we're at in April when the schematic design cost estimates come in, just in light of what's happened over the last year or so with the escalation in the market. It's a concern. I think we've all seen it. Everyone's been to the gas stations and the supermarkets, and the construction market certainly hasn't been immune to that inflation. But anyway, I know that's kind of a downer of a way to end the meeting, but it's part of what we have to do as the OPM. And then I'll just note that we are soliciting proposals for hazardous materials consultants. They're going to come out and do a survey once we've come to an agreement with one. They'll be looking at lead paint, asbestos, PCBs. They'll start with a survey, they'll quantify what they find, they'll submit a report to us, and eventually what they'll do is they'll put together some spec sections that'll go into the bid documents. That'll tell what the contractors how much they need to abate come time of construction. It's going to play a factor in the pricing that we get at the bids. But that process is ongoing. I'm expecting proposals by next Wednesday. I sent out an RFP to a short list of people that we typically work with. And I've already gotten one, which is good in this busy market. I've already got one proposal from a hazmat consultant. So at the next meeting, I'll be asking you to approve the recommended hazmat consultant. But unless there's any questions, that's it. Again, I meant to be brief, and so that's it.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Something just crossed my mind really quickly. The new building, I'm assuming going with the new sort of energy use policy, we're gonna go very heavy electric. Have you contacted Hudson Light and Power to talk about the needs?
No, I can't say that we have.
They're excellent to work with, but I do know it's worth getting to them early, only because they have the power supply, but getting the materials to get it to you can be an issue, so they need as much lead time as you can.
Probably should have ordered it 2 years ago. And I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
Actually, I shouldn't
Yeah,
order
lead
transformers.
times on transformers.
196
Weeks.
That's it.
But, you know, that might be, I don't know what the needs are for this project, that might be fine.
Yeah, we briefly talked about the need for a transformer. It actually depends somewhat on the cistern and how we're pumping the water. So we'll continue the discussion and we'll bring in, that's when we need to.
Transformers are the eggs of the construction industry.
Air
For the
handlers
bucket
are
trucks,
too,
because we were
so.
waiting 3 years for bucket trucks. so.
It really is 196 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, no, yes, no, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so building 2.0, we need to review and approve payment for the invoices, or the invoice, I should say. From Colliers.
I'll make a motion that we approve the Colliers invoice for $8,364.38.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call. Morgan,
Hi, yes.
Honey,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Aisha.
Yes.
Tina's yes, Frank,
Yes.
Marcy.
Yes.
Kat. Yes. Denise.
Yes.
Thank you. All in favor. Unanimous. Okay, let's see, we talked about the meeting schedule. We approved the minutes. Is there anything else?
I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Can I just say, is it unanimous? Or do I have to do a roll call?
A show of hands.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Unanimous,
thank
not
you.
all in favor.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Night,
Share the
thanks,
list
Morgan.
of
Bye,
customers.
Sonny.